Well, aren't you a little far from the flight attendant's galley? Those were the 9 words that ignited a firestorm at 30,000 feet. The woman who said them, a senior gate agent with a perfect record, had no idea she was speaking to the captain of the Boeing 787 she was supposed to be boarding. She thought she was putting a misplaced woman in her place. But 5 minutes later, it was the gate agent and her entire crew who were out of a job, escorted from the terminal in disgrace. This isn't just a story about payback. It's about what happened after the cameras stopped rolling, when the viral moment ended and the hard, real-life karma began. Stick around, because the final twist is one you won't see coming. Captain Eva Rostova loved the pre-dawn quiet of an airport. It was a liminal space, a world holding its breath before the frantic chaos of the day. The polished floors of Terminal D at JFK reflected the sterile fluorescent lights in long, silent streaks. The air hummed with the low thrum of industrial ventilation and the distant whine of a baggage tug. For Eva, this was the sanctuary before the sky. At 34, she was a veteran in a world that still saw her as a novelty. Her crisp white pilot shirt was starched to perfection, the 4 golden stripes on her epaulets gleaming. They signified a command she had earned 10 times over, through scorching desert landings in Afghanistan with the Air Force and treacherous North Atlantic crossings in weather that would make a seasoned sailor pray. She was one of fewer than 150 black female airline pilots in the entire United States, and one of an even smaller, almost mythical number to hold the rank of captain at a major international carrier like Global Wings Air. She didn't carry this statistic as a burden, but as a fact. A data point in a reality she navigated with unshakable professionalism. Her pre-flight routine was a ritual: coffee, black, a thorough review of the flight plan, a transatlantic haul from New York to London Heathrow. She analyzed the weather charts, noting the jet stream's position and a patch of expected turbulence over Newfoundland. She was meticulous, leaving nothing to chance. Flying a 250-ton machine with over 300 souls on board was a responsibility she felt in her very bones. Walking towards gate D24, her rollaboard suitcase gliding silently behind her, she felt the familiar shift in atmosphere. The gate area was an island of agitated energy. Passengers were already crowding the podium, their faces a mixture of anxiety and entitlement. She scanned the crowd with a practiced eye, her gaze professional and detached. Behind the counter stood 2 figures. One was a young man, Ben, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, his eyes darting nervously between his computer screen and the growing line. The other was the senior gate agent. Her name tag read Karen Miller. She was a woman in her late 50s with a helmet of perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a gaze that could curdle milk. She radiated an aura of absolute, unquestionable authority over her tiny fiefdom of laminated countertops and boarding pass scanners. She was barking instructions at a family struggling with their carry-ons, her voice sharp and brittle. Eva approached the crew access lane, a separate, empty corridor next to the main boarding lines. She pulled out her airline-issued ID and passport, holding them ready. It was standard procedure to check in with the gate agents before heading down the jet bridge to the aircraft. Karen Miller finished with the family, dismissing them with a flick of her wrist. She turned, her eyes sweeping past Eva as if she were a piece of furniture, and called out, "Next!" to the main passenger line. Eva cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm and even. Karen's head snapped towards her. She took in Eva's uniform, but her eyes seemed to register a disconnect, a computational error in her brain. Her lips curled into a thin, condescending smirk. "Well, aren't you a little far from the flight attendant's galley?" she said, her voice just loud enough for the first few passengers in line to hear. "The cabin crew boards with their group. You know that." A few people snickered. Eva's face remained impassive. The storm had just arrived, right on schedule. The air thickened with a sudden, uncomfortable tension. The snickers from the passenger line died down, replaced by the awkward shuffling of feet. They were witnesses now, not just travelers. Eva held Karen Miller's gaze, her expression unreadable. Inside, a familiar, weary anger began to smolder, an emotion she had learned to contain with iron discipline. "I'm Captain Rostova," Ava stated simply, her voice betraying no hint of the insult's sting. She slid her credentials across the counter. "I'm here to board the aircraft for my pre-flight checks." Karen glanced down at the ID, her smirk not faltering. She picked it up and held it close to her face, scrutinizing it as if it were a poorly forged document. The ID was standard, featuring Eva's photo, name, employee number, and the unmistakable designation, Captain. Rostova. Karen repeated the name slowly, mispronouncing it with deliberate emphasis on the wrong syllable. "That's interesting." She tapped a long, red-painted fingernail on the photo. "This picture is very dark. It's hard to see the resemblance." Ava remained silent. She had played this game before. It was a game of 1,000 tiny cuts, of questioning her presence, her authority, her very existence in a space where some people believed she did not belong. "Ben," Karen called to her younger colleague without looking away from Ava. "Come here. I need a second set of eyes on this." Ben approached hesitantly, his face pale. He glanced at Eva, then at the ID, then back at Karen. "It looks fine to me, Karen," he mumbled, clearly uncomfortable. "It doesn't look fine to me," Karen snapped, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was paradoxically more audible. "We've had security alerts, people trying to gain access to the cockpit with fake uniforms. We have to be vigilant." She looked back at Eva, her eyes narrowed. "I'm going to need to see a second piece of photo identification, a driver's license, perhaps." This was a breach of protocol. The airline-issued crew ID was the highest form of security clearance within the airport. Asking for a driver's license was not just redundant. It was an insult. It implied her credentials, issued by the very company Karen worked for, were fraudulent. "That won't be necessary," Eva said, her tone hardening slightly. "My airline identification is sufficient. I need to get to my aircraft. We're on a tight schedule." "The schedule," Karen said with a saccharine smile, "is my concern until the door closes. And right now, my concern is an unauthorized person in a pilot's uniform attempting to access a multi-million-dollar airplane. So I will ask you again, please provide a secondary ID." A man in the front of the passenger line, a businessman in a tailored suit, spoke up. "For God's sake, lady, she's the pilot. Just let her on the plane so we can leave on time." Karen shot him a venomous look. "Sir, I am in charge of the safety and security of this gate. I will not be rushed. If you'd like to file a complaint, I'd be happy to provide you with the form." The man recoiled, silenced. Karen had asserted her dominance. She turned her attention back to Eva, her victory making her bolder. "Now, last chance," she said. "Show me the ID or I'm calling Port Authority security." Eva knew she had two choices. She could escalate the situation here and now, turning the gate into a theater of conflict. Or she could de-escalate, comply, and deal with the fallout later. The 318 passengers waiting to board deserved to get to London. Her primary duty was to them. With a slow, deliberate motion, she reached into her bag and produced her wallet, extracting her New York driver's license and placing it on the counter. Karen snatched it up, comparing the two photos with an exaggerated show of diligence. Okay, I suppose this will have to do." She still didn't hand the IDs back. Instead, she placed them on the counter next to her keyboard. Just then, the gate supervisor, Mark Johnson, arrived. He was a harried-looking man in his 40s, his tie already loosened. "Karen, what's the holdup? Boarding should have started 3 minutes ago." "Just handling a small security issue, Mark," Karen said breezily. "This individual was trying to board, and her credentials seemed a bit off. I've got it under control." Mark looked at Eva, then at her uniform, a flicker of confusion on his face. He saw the 4 stripes on her shoulders. He saw the captain's hat tucked under her arm. He saw a black woman. He made a calculation, the kind of weak-willed calculation that prioritizes the path of least resistance. He chose to back his employee. "Right," he said, nodding at Karen. Good work. Can't be too careful. He then turned to Eva, his tone patronizing. Ma'am, we do apologize for the delay, but we have to follow our procedures. I'm sure you understand. Eva looked from Mark's dismissive face to Karen's triumphant one. She had been publicly questioned, belittled, and implicitly accused of being an imposter. And now the supervisor was sanctioning the behavior. It was no longer about one bigoted employee. It was an institutional failure. I understand procedure perfectly, Eva said, her voice dangerously quiet. What I don't understand is this. What we have, Karen interjected, her moment of triumph complete, is a situation that requires verification. We're going to have to call the crew operations center to verify your status. She picked up the phone, a clear power play to prolong the humiliation. This might take a while. The lines are always busy. Then she delivered the final unforgivable blow. She gestured with her head towards the public seating area. Why don't you go and wait outside the boarding area? We'll call you if and when we can confirm you are who you say you are. Wait outside, like a child sent to the principal's office, like a stranger who didn't belong. The words hung in the air, a declaration of exclusion. The entire gate area was now silent, watching. Eva looked at Karen. She looked at Mark. She looked at Ben, who was staring intently at his shoes. Then she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Without another word, she turned and walked away from the counter, not towards the passenger seating, but towards a quiet corner by the window overlooking the tarmac. She pulled out her phone. The time for de-escalation was over. Karen Miller felt a surge of satisfaction. She had faced a challenge to her authority and had won. The woman in the uniform, she refused to think of her as a captain, had retreated. Mark gave her a supportive nod before hurrying off to his next fire, leaving Karen in command. She made a show of dialing a number on her desk phone, deliberately taking her time. She would let Captain Rostova stew for a good 10 minutes before she even pretended to get through to anyone. Ben, her junior colleague, finally looked up. Karen, are you sure about this? Her ID looked real. We're going to have a massive delay. Ben, you've been here 6 months. I've been here 22 years, Karen said, her voice dripping with condescension. I know a phony when I see one. Something about her was off. Too arrogant. Now get ready to start pre-boarding for families and Diamond Medallion members. But Ben wasn't looking at her. He was staring past her, towards the jet bridge entrance. His eyes were wide. Karen. In her corner by the window, Eva Rostova wasn't stewing. She was acting. Her phone call had been brief, precise, and devastatingly effective. She hadn't called the general crew operations line that Karen was pretending to be stuck on hold with. She had called the direct private cell number of David Armstrong, the chief pilot for the entire JFK base of Global Wings Air. Armstrong, a gruff voice had answered on the first ring. Dave, it's Eva. Flight 88 to Heathrow, she said, her voice steady. I'm at gate D24. I'm being denied access to my aircraft by the gate staff. They've accused me of having fraudulent credentials and have refused to let me board. She paused. Supervisor on duty has sanctioned their decision. They told me to wait outside. There was a moment of dead silence on the other end of the line. David Armstrong was a pilot's pilot, a former Marine aviator who had zero tolerance for two things: safety risks and bureaucratic nonsense that interfered with his crews. What Eva had just described was both. A crew should never be separated by a ground squabble, and questioning a captain's authority at the gate was a massive red flag. Stay right where you are, Eva, Armstrong said, his voice now like chips of ice. Do not engage. Do not get on that plane. I'm 5 minutes out. The call ended. Eva put her phone away and watched the tarmac, her face a calm mask. 5 minutes. 4 minutes and 30 seconds later, two figures strode into the gate area with a purpose that parted the sea of waiting passengers. The first was David Armstrong himself, a tall, imposing man in his late 60s, his own uniform immaculate, the 4 stripes on his shoulders seeming to shine with a light of their own. He was the king of this domain, and his expression was thunderous. The second figure was the airline station manager, a man named Robert Pelham, who looked like he had just been summoned from his office by God and told the apocalypse was imminent. Karen Miller saw them coming. Her smug expression evaporated, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed confusion. "Captain Armstrong, Mr. Pelham, what are you doing here? Is there a problem?" Armstrong ignored her completely. His eyes scanned the area until they found Ava by the window. He walked directly to her. "Captain Rostova," he said, his voice loud enough for the entire gate to hear. "I apologize for the conduct of this airline's ground staff. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Dave," Ava said calmly, "just eager to get my flight underway." "Your flight is not going anywhere with this ground crew," Armstrong stated, turning to face Karen, Mark, who had mysteriously reappeared, looking terrified, and Ben. His gaze was withering. "Miss Miller, Mr. Johnson, my office, now." Karen's face crumpled, the color drained from it, leaving behind a pasty, terrified white. But security, her ID," she stammered. "Her ID," Armstrong roared, his voice bouncing off the high terminal ceilings. "Her ID is issued by this company, for which she has worked for 12 years. She flew F-18S off aircraft carriers while you were stamping boarding passes. She is the captain in command of that Boeing 787. And you have, in a stunning display of incompetence and disrespect, undermined her authority in front of her passengers and created a security incident where none existed." He turned to Robert Pelham, the station manager. "Robert, I want this entire gate crew, all of them, stood down. Effective immediately. Find me a new crew. This flight is not leaving until I have a professional team at this gate who can tell the difference between a pilot and a terrorist." He then looked directly at Karen, Mark, and Ben. His voice dropped, becoming colder and more lethal than his shout. "You are to hand over your airport security credentials to Mr. Pelham. You will be escorted from the terminal. Your employment status is pending an immediate and thorough investigation, which I will personally oversee." He took a step closer to Karen. "And let me be crystal clear. Captain Rostova doesn't just fly this plane. She is this airline. You, on the other hand, are replaceable." It was a public execution. The passengers, who had been watching in stunned silence, now broke into a smattering of applause. The businessman who had spoken up earlier gave a loud, "Hear, hear." Karen Miller stood frozen, her world imploding in real time. The power she had wielded with such arrogance was gone. She was no longer the queen of Gate D-24. She was just a woman who had made a catastrophic mistake. Eva watched, not with triumph, but with a profound sense of exhaustion. She hadn't wanted this. She hadn't wanted a public spectacle. She had just wanted to do her job. She retrieved her IDs from the counter where Karen had left them, and with a nod to Armstrong, she finally walked through the crew access lane and down the jet bridge. She had a plane to fly. The interior of the Boeing 787 cockpit was Eva's true office. It was a space of controlled, complex order. The myriad screens, switches, and controls glowed softly in the dim light. The scent of filtered air and warm electronics was comforting. Here, the rules were dictated by physics and federal aviation regulations, not by the petty prejudices of a gate agent. Her first officer, a young, competent pilot named Alex Serrano, was already there, having boarded earlier through a different access point. He looked up from his checklist, his expression a mix of concern and confusion. "Ava, what the hell was going on out there? I heard shouting. Ops just radioed about a gate crew change and a possible delay." Ava slid into the left-hand seat, the captain's chair. She took a deep breath, the first she felt she'd taken in 20 minutes. "We had an issue at the gate, Alex. Let's just say my credentials were thoroughly vetted." Alex's eyes widened in understanding. He'd flown with Ava for 6 months. He knew her reputation for being unflappable, brilliant, and utterly professional. He also knew what she occasionally had to deal with. "You're kidding me. Again?" "It was a bit more than usual this time," Ava said, her voice flat. She didn't want to relive it. Instead, she channeled her focus into her work, the familiar litany of the pre-flight checklist a calming balm. "Let's get started. Pre-flight initialization." "Checking." Alex responded, his fingers dancing across the flight management computer. While they worked, the drama was unfolding back in the terminal. Robert Pelham, the station manager, was grimly efficient. He collected the ID badges from a shell-shocked Karen, a trembling Mark, and a ghostly pale Ben. An airport security detail arrived discreetly to escort them, not through the public areas, but through the back corridors and service hallways. The walk of shame for fired airline staff. Karen Miller was numb. 22 years of service, of perfect attendance records, of glowing performance reviews for her by-the-book efficiency, all vaporized in under 10 minutes. As she was led away, she could hear the announcement being made at her former gate. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay to Flight 88 to London. We are currently undergoing a ground staff change to ensure the highest level of service and security for our passengers. We appreciate your patience. The highest level of service and security." The words were a dagger, twisting the knife of her humiliation. She had built her entire identity around being the guardian of those things, and now they were being used as the reason for her public disgrace. The delay stretched to 90 minutes as a new, flustered but exceedingly polite gate crew was scrambled from other assignments. The passengers, for the most part, were understanding. The story of what had happened had spread through the waiting area in whispers and snippets of conversation. The pilot, the black woman, had been hassled by the gate dragon, and the head honcho had come down and fired her on the spot. It was real-life drama, far more interesting than any in-flight movie. On the flight deck, Ava and Alex worked in seamless harmony, preparing the complex aircraft for its journey. But beneath her professional exterior, Ava felt the weight of the incident settling upon her. Each time something like this happened, it chipped away a small piece of her. It was a tax she had to pay for occupying the space she had earned. A tax of emotional labor, of forced composure, of having to prove herself again and again. She thought of the thousands of uneventful flights, the hundreds of times she'd walked through terminals without a second glance. But it was the ugly moments that stuck, the ones that served as a stark reminder that her 4 golden stripes didn't make her immune. Finally, the new gate agent gave them the all-clear. The jet bridge retracted. Ava's hands moved with practiced grace over the controls. "Ground, this is Global 88 Heavy, ready to push back from D-24. Global 88 Heavy, pushback approved." The voice from the tower crackled in her headset. As the powerful engines spooled to life with a deep, resonating hum, Ava guided the massive aircraft away from the terminal. She didn't look back at gate D-24. She focused ahead, on the taxiway, the runway, and the vast, open sky beyond. It was up there in the boundless blue that she was truly in command, where the only judgments that mattered were based on altitude, airspeed, and adherence to the laws of flight. For the next 7 hours, she could leave the ugliness of the ground behind. But both she and Karen Miller were about to learn a new, brutal lesson of the modern world. What happens on the ground doesn't stay on the ground. It goes online. And once it's there, it lives forever. While Flight 88 was cruising at 38,000 feet over the Atlantic, the incident at Gate D-24 was beginning its second life. The businessman in the tailored suit, whose name was Michael Chen, had not only witnessed the event, he had filmed it. Starting from the moment Karen Miller had said, "I'm going to need to see a second piece of photo identification," his phone had been discreetly recording. He had captured it all. Karen's condescending tone, Eva's steely composure, Mark's weak-willed complicity, and the stunning arrival of Chief Pilot Armstrong. He had filmed the public dressing down, the confiscation of the badges, everything. Upon boarding, he connected to the plane's Wi-Fi. He was a marketing executive, and he understood the power of a narrative. He uploaded the 2-minute video to Twitter, which he still stubbornly called Twitter, with a simple caption, "Disgusting scene at JFK Gate D-24. At Global Wings Air gate agent and supervisor refused to believe a black woman is the captain of our flight. They tried to kick her out. Instead, a top pilot showed up and fired the whole crew on the spot. Justice served. Hash flying. while black hash global wings air. The tweet detonated like a bomb. Before Eva had even leveled off at her cruising altitude, the video had 1,000 retweets. By the time the cabin crew was serving the main meal service, it had passed 100,000. By the time the plane was over Irish airspace, it had been viewed over 5 million times. News outlets hungry for viral content ripped the video and embedded it in articles with screaming headlines. Wait outside. Airline captain faces racist confrontation in shocking video. CNN. Gate agent fired in viral video after challenging black female pilot. Fox News. Global wings air in damage control mode after JFK incident goes viral. The New York Times Global Wings Air's corporate communications department went into full-blown crisis mode. Their social media feeds were a dumpster fire of outrage. Celebrities, politicians, and activists were retweeting the video, adding their own condemnation. The hashtag #KarenMiller was trending, alongside #Eva Rostova, who was being hailed as a hero of grace under pressure. Her name, which had been unknown to the public that morning, was now a global symbol. The airline's first move was to issue a statement. It was a masterpiece of corporate speak full of "we are deeply concerned. This does not reflect our values, and we are conducting a full investigation." It was torn to shreds online as being weak and insufficient. By the time Eva landed the 787 smoothly at Heathrow, a second, more forceful statement had been issued by the CEO of Global Wings Air, James Harrison. The events that transpired at JFK are appalling and unacceptable. Captain Eva Rostova is one of our finest pilots, a leader and a role model. The treatment she endured was disgraceful. The 3 ground staff members involved in the incident have been terminated, effective immediately. We apologize unreservedly to Captain Rostova and to our customers who witnessed this event. Global Wings Air has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind, and we will be implementing mandatory system-wide retraining for all ground staff to ensure this never happens again. For Karen Miller, the reckoning was no longer just the loss of a job. It was the complete and utter destruction of her life. Her full name and photo were everywhere. Amateur internet sleuths had found her Facebook profile, her LinkedIn page, her home address in a quiet Queens suburb. She was doxxed. Her phone rang incessantly with calls from blocked numbers, some screaming obscenities, others issuing death threats. Her email inbox filled with thousands of messages calling her a vile racist. A news van was parked outside her house. Her neighbors, who had once shared pleasantries over the fence, now closed their curtains when she looked out the window. Her son called from college, his voice filled with shame and confusion. "Mom, what did you do?" Ben, the junior agent, vanished from social media entirely, his digital footprint wiped clean. Mark Johnson's LinkedIn profile was flooded with abusive comments, and his wife, a local real estate agent, began receiving calls to her office demanding they fire her because she was married to a racist. The karma was not just swift, it was brutal, overwhelming, and digital. Karen Miller, who had sought to publicly humiliate one woman, was now being subjected to a public humiliation of a magnitude she could never have imagined. She unplugged her landline, turned off her phone, and sat in her silent house, the glow of the news van's camera light filtering through her blinds. She had lost her job, her reputation, and her anonymity. She felt like the most hated woman in America, and in that darkness, a different feeling began to fester alongside the fear and shame, a burning, self-righteous anger. They had it all wrong. She wasn't a monster, she was the victim, and she was going to fight back. For 10 days, Karen Miller lived in a self-imposed prison within her own home. The curtains remained drawn, casting the familiar rooms in a perpetual twilight. The television was off, but its blank screen seemed to mock her, a dark mirror reflecting the woman the world now saw her as. She had unplugged the landline, but she couldn't escape the phantom ringing in her ears. Her smartphone lay dormant and face down on the kitchen counter, a small black slab of potential venom. Occasionally, she would pick it up, her thumb hovering over the power button, a morbid curiosity compelling her to see the latest wave of hatred. She'd see headlines flash on the lock screen. Her name, her face paired with words like racist, disgraced Gate Karen. Each glimpse was like touching a hot stove, and she'd drop the phone as if it were burning her. Her life had been reduced to the four walls of her house and the suffocating loop of her own thoughts. It was a cycle of terror, shame, and a burgeoning fiery indignation. They had destroyed her. Her 22 years of loyal service had been erased. Her identity as a competent, by-the-book professional had been incinerated in a 2-minute video. She wasn't a monster. She was meticulous. She was a stickler for the rules. Wasn't that what they wanted? Wasn't that what security was all about? The shame was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. But beneath it, the indignation was beginning to glow like a hot coal. They had it all wrong. It was a misunderstanding. No, it was more than that. It was a setup. That pilot, Rostova, had been looking for a fight. She'd been haughty, arrogant, walking up to the counter with an air of entitlement as if the rules didn't apply to her. Karen had simply pushed back, asserting the procedure she was paid to enforce. And for that, her life was over. On the 11th day, a rock shattered her living room window. Tied to it was a note scrawled in crude letters, "Racist scum, get out." The sound of the glass breaking was the sound of her last nerve snapping. The fear that had paralyzed her finally transmuted into pure, unadulterated rage. She was not going to be run out of her own home. She was not going to let them win. She was going to fight. Her first calls were to wrongful termination lawyers. The first 3 hung up on her after she gave her name. The fourth, a woman with a weary voice, listened for a few minutes before sighing. "Mrs. Miller, there is a video of the incident viewed by over 50 million people. No credible firm will touch this. My advice is to lay low and hope it blows over." Karen was about to give up when she remembered a commercial she'd seen late at night, one of those aggressive ads wedged between programs. A man with slicked back hair and an expensive suit stared into the camera, promising to fight for the silenced majority. His name was Arthur Finch. His slogan was, "When they shout you down, I shout louder." She found his number online. A crisp receptionist put her on hold for less than a minute. "Arthur Finch," a voice boomed, radiating confidence. Karen launched into her story, expecting to be cut off. Instead, Finch listened intently, interjecting only with clarifying questions. "And you're saying your primary motivation was security protocol, and Captain Rostova refused a lawful request for secondary identification at first, and she escalated it by calling an executive on his private line." Yes, exactly," Karen said, her voice filled with the relief of finally being heard. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Karen could almost hear the gears turning in Finch's mind. He wasn't just hearing a case. He was seeing an opportunity, a huge, nationally televised, career-making opportunity. "Karen," Finch said, his voice now dripping with theatrical empathy, "what has been done to you is a travesty. It is a modern-day witch hunt. You are not just a client. You are a cause. I'll take your case." 2 days later, Karen sat opposite Arthur Finch in his wood-paneled office. He was exactly as he appeared on television. Sharp suit, perfect hair, and eyes that gleamed with predatory intelligence. He had a whiteboard behind his desk, as if he were a general planning a campaign. "All right, Karen, let's go to war," he began, picking up a marker. "Right now, you are a one-dimensional villain in a story written by your enemies. We need to give you a new story. We need to recast you." He pulled up the viral video on a large monitor. "This is our enemy," he said, pointing at the screen. "We cannot deny what is on this tape, but we can, and we will, reframe it." He played the video, pausing it every few seconds. "First, your tone. They call it condescending. We will call it authoritative. You're a senior agent in a high-stress environment, responsible for hundreds of lives. You're not there to be everybody's best friend. You're there to be in control. We lean into that." He wrote authoritative, not condescending, on the whiteboard. "Next, the request for a second ID. This is our cornerstone. This is not a racist microaggression. This is a post-9/11 security protocol. You felt, in your professional judgment, that there was a behavioral red flag. What was the red flag? She was arrogant, Karen offered. Perfect, Finch exclaimed. She projected an air of dismissiveness toward standard security screening. It wasn't her skin color that triggered your alarm bells. It was her attitude, her hostility. This is crucial, Karen. It was never about race, it was about behavior. He scrawled behavior, not race, on the board. Now the masterstroke. Captain Rostova didn't de-escalate. She didn't follow procedure by calling a public operations line. She used a private cell phone number to call a powerful friend high up in the company. What does that tell us? It tells us this was a setup. She is part of a corporate elite. You, Karen, are the working-class woman just trying to do her job. She used her privilege and connections to crush you. You see the narrative, she isn't the victim, you are. Elite pilot versus working woman, victim of corporate politics. He coached her for hours. He taught her how to control her expression, how to look earnest and slightly wounded. He instructed her on which words to use: vigilant, procedure, intimidated, bullied, and which to avoid. He told her to refer to Eva only as Miss Rostova, subtly stripping her of the rank she had weaponized. By the end of the session, Karen Miller had a new, polished version of reality, a story she began to believe with every fiber of her being. The platform for their counteroffensive was carefully chosen. Bill O'Sullivan's top-rated cable news show, The Factor. O'Sullivan was a master at channeling the grievances of his audience, and Karen Miller's story was perfect fodder. In the green room before the show, Karen's hands trembled. A makeup artist powdered her face, softening her features. Finch stood over her like a boxing coach. Remember, Karen, you are the victim. You were doing your job. You have been canceled by the woke mob. Stick to the script. Let a tear fall if you can, but only one. We're going for sympathy, not hysterics. The studio lights were blindingly hot. Bill O'Sullivan greeted her with a warm, fatherly smile during the commercial break. Just tell your story, Karen. The country is listening. The red light on the camera blinked on. Karen Miller, O'Sullivan began, his voice grave. You have been called the most hated woman in America. You were fired, you were doxxed. You have received death threats, all for, as you say, simply doing your job. Tell us what really happened at Gate D24. Karen looked into the camera, her expression a carefully rehearsed blend of fear and resolve. Bill, thank you. It's been a nightmare, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I was the senior gate agent. For 22 years, my #1 priority has been the safety and security of my passengers. We are trained since 9/11 to be hypervigilant, to trust our instincts. And what did your instincts tell you that day? O'Sullivan prompted. When Miss Rostova approached the gate, she was different. She was very demanding, very dismissive of me, of my entire crew. It was an attitude I was trained to see as a red flag. When I asked to see her credentials, her reaction was hostile. It had absolutely nothing to do with her race, Bill. It was her behavior that concerned me. I would have done the same for anyone of any color who presented themselves with that level of aggression at a secure checkpoint. The lie was seamless, delivered with practiced sincerity. So you asked for a secondary ID, which seems reasonable, O'Sullivan said, nodding. And then what? She refused at first. She was very confrontational. I was trying to follow procedure and call the official operations line to verify her, but she didn't want to follow the rules. Instead, she made a private call to a powerful executive, a personal friend of hers. Suddenly, this man comes down and publicly berates me. He fires me and my entire team on the spot in front of hundreds of people. I was bullied, Bill. I was intimidated, and then I was fired, all to appease an arrogant pilot who didn't want to follow the same rules as everyone else. I am a victim of cancel culture. The interview was a masterclass in narrative warfare. It hit every note Finch had orchestrated. By the time it was over, the internet was already ablaze. On a layover in a sterile hotel room in Frankfurt, Eva Rostova watched the clips on her laptop, her knuckles white as she gripped the desk. The sheer audacity of the lies was breathtaking. They had taken the truth and inverted it with surgical precision. She was no longer a professional who had been subjected to a racist, humiliating ordeal. She was now an arrogant, aggressive, elite bully who used her privilege to crush a poor working-class woman. It was vile. It was brilliant. Arthur Finch called Karen as soon as the segment ended. "They're eating it up," he said, glee in his voice. "The donations are already pouring into the defense fund. We're trending. You're not Gate Karen anymore. You're a hero." Karen hung up the phone and looked at her own reflection in the dark hotel window. For the first time in weeks, she didn't see a monster. She saw a martyr. She saw a victim. She saw the woman Arthur Finch and Bill O'Sullivan had created, and she smiled. The battle was far from over, but she had just fired back with a devastating volley. The clear, bright line between right and wrong had just been blurred into a murky, angry gray. 1 year. 365 days had passed since the incident at Gate D24. To the world that consumed viral moments like popcorn, it was ancient history, a forgotten hashtag buried under a million subsequent outrages. But for the individuals at its epicenter, the fallout was not a fleeting digital storm. It was the climate they now lived in. The karma that came was not a single clean lightning strike of justice. It was a slow-moving weather front, settling over their lives, bringing with it a pressure and a chill that seeped into everything. For Captain Eva Rostova, the changes were stark and visible. She now occupied a corner office on the top floor of Global Wings Air's JFK Operations Center. The title on the door read, Captain Eva Rostova, Chief Pilot, 787 Fleet. It was David Armstrong's old job. He had retired 6 months after the incident, recommending Eva as his only conceivable successor. The airline, eager to demonstrate its commitment to change and recognizing her undeniable merit, had fast-tracked the promotion. From her window, she had a panoramic view of the runways, a god's-eye perspective of the intricate choreography of arrivals and departures. It was a position of immense power and responsibility. She was no longer just flying the planes. She was managing the pilots who flew them, setting standards, mentoring new hires, and serving as the final word on operational matters for the flagship fleet. By every external metric, she had not just won, she had triumphed. But the office, for all its prestige, felt like a gilded cage. The joy she once found in the anonymity of the terminal, in the simple, focused act of walking to her plane, was gone. Now, every walk was a performance. She was a landmark. She would see the flicker of recognition in the eyes of passengers, the way other employees would straighten up and fall silent as she passed. They weren't seeing Eva Rostova, the pilot who loved the challenge of a crosswind landing. They were seeing the woman from the video, the symbol. This morning, the weight of that symbolism felt particularly heavy. She was reviewing the file of a new first officer who had requested a meeting. As she read through the young woman's impeccable training record, she caught her reflection in the dark screen of her monitor. The face looking back was the same, but the eyes were different. They were warier. The easy calm she once possessed had been replaced by a permanent state of alert. The incident had installed a new, unwelcome co-pilot in her mind, one that constantly monitored her surroundings, analyzed interactions for hidden meanings, and braced for the next challenge to her authority. It was exhausting. The promotion meant she flew less, spending more time grounded by paperwork and meetings, and on the ground, the turbulence was inescapable. For Karen Miller, the ground was all she had left. Her lawsuit, the great hope she had clung to, had disintegrated in a humiliating spectacle of legal reality. She remembered sitting in the sterile beige conference room of her lawyer's office, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and defeat. Her lawyer, a man whose initial media bravado had long since evaporated, slid a document across the polished table. The judge granted Global Wings' motion for summary judgment, Karen. He's dismissing the case. What? Karen's voice was a croak. What does that mean? We haven't even gone to trial. It means he's reviewed the evidence, the video, the depositions from Armstrong and other staff, and has determined that there's no genuine dispute of material fact. He ruled that your actions provided the airline with legitimate, non-discriminatory grounds for termination. He specifically cited undermining the chain of command and creating a public safety and service disruption. The lawyer sighed, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. He called the video damning. There's no jury in the world that wouldn't be swayed by it. But they twisted it. It was about security. Her attitude, Karen insisted, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. They sounded hollow even to her. The video doesn't show her attitude, Karen. It shows yours, the lawyer said, his patience finally snapping. It shows you belittling a captain in front of hundreds of people. The case is over. The one against the passenger who filmed it was thrown out months ago. We're done. The finality of it was like a physical blow. The six-figure defense fund her supporters had raised was gone, swallowed by legal fees. The cable news show no longer returned her calls. She was old news. The ensuing months were a slow, painful unraveling. The house in Queens, the one she'd lived in for 30 years and filled with memories, had to be sold to cover her debts. She spent a bleak autumn packing up her life into cardboard boxes, each one a testament to a life that no longer existed. Her son, once her fiercest defender, had a painful phone call with her from college. Mom, I saw the full deposition online. I read what the judge said. You never told me you held on to her ID, that you told her to wait outside. Why did you do that? His voice was strained, full of a disappointment that hurt more than any death threat. He doesn't understand, she tried to explain to her sister Linda, in whose spare bedroom she now lived. The room was cramped, filled with boxes she couldn't bring herself to unpack. That pilot, she had it in for me from the start. She came in with this chip on her shoulder. Linda, a tired but pragmatic woman, finally had enough. Oh, stop it, Karen, just stop. There was no chip on her shoulder. There was one on yours. You saw a black woman in a pilot's uniform and your brain short-circuited. You couldn't handle it. You lost your job, your house, and now you're losing your son. All because you cannot bring yourself to admit you were wrong. That right there is your real problem. The truth was a slap in the face. Karen recoiled, her expression hardening into a bitter mask. You sound just like them, she whispered. She retreated into silence, her victimhood the only possession she had left. The true, hard karma for Karen Miller wasn't just the loss of her career or her home. It was the prison she had built for herself, a cell of resentment where she was both the inmate and the warden, sentenced to a life of relitigating the 5 minutes that had cost her everything. The ripples spread to the other two. Mark Johnson now managed a prestige rent-a-car branch near the LaGuardia airport. His world of overseeing multi-million-dollar jets had shrunk to a fleet of Toyota Camrys and Ford Escapes. Most days were a monotonous blur of inventory checks and customer complaints about gas charges. But some days were worse. A customer, a businessman on his way to a meeting, paused while signing the rental agreement. Hey, don't I know you from somewhere? He asked, squinting. Weren't you that airline supervisor? On that video, the one with the pilot? Mark's blood ran cold. He just shook his head, looking down at the paperwork. No, you've got the wrong guy, he mumbled, his face burning with shame. The man shrugged and left, but the damage was done. Mark spent the rest of the day in the back, cleaning upholstery with a fury, the scent of chemical lemon cleaner unable to mask the stench of his failure. Ben Carter, the young agent, had fled. He'd moved 1,000 miles away, re-enrolled in college, and was studying to be a librarian. He sought a world of quiet order, of dewy decimals and hushed whispers, a world as far from the chaotic judgment of a public terminal as he could get. One afternoon in the university library, he was scrolling through the news on a computer when he saw a headline. Global Wings Air appoints first black female chief pilot at JFK. The article featured a smiling photo of Ava Rostova. Ben stared at it for a long time. He felt a complex mix of emotions, a profound sense of relief that she had been so thoroughly vindicated, and a deep, abiding shame for his own cowardice. He had stood by and said nothing. He closed the browser, the library's silence suddenly feeling accusatory. His karma was a quiet one, a lifetime sentence of remembering his silence in the face of injustice. Back at JFK, Ava finally put the file down and walked over to the coffee machine in her office. Later that day, she stopped at a public coffee shop in the terminal to grab a better cup. As she waited for her Americano, the young barista's eyes went wide. "Oh my God," the barista whispered, fumbling with the credit card reader. "You're her. You're Captain Rostova, the pilot from that video." Ava gave a small, tired smile. "Just a pilot grabbing coffee," she said, hoping to deflect. "No, you're a legend," the young man gushed. "The way you handled that woman was amazing, so cool." The encounter left her feeling profoundly conflicted. The young man's admiration was genuine, but it was for her performance in a moment of trauma. It wasn't for her skill in handling a microburst over the Rockies or her textbook landing in a snowstorm at O'Hare. She had become famous for the worst 5 minutes of her professional life. Later, the young first officer she had been reading about knocked on her office door. Her name was Maya Washington. She was sharp, eager, and radiated a nervous energy. "Captain Rostova, thank you for seeing me." "Of course, Maya, have a seat. What can I do for you?" The young woman hesitated, then the words tumbled out. "I just wanted to thank you. I'm not sure I'd be here if it weren't for you. When I was in flight school, the instructors, the other students, most of them were great, but some of them, they made you feel like you had to be 10 times better just to be considered equal. I almost quit." She looked Ava in the eyes. "Then that video came out. And I saw you. The way you stood there, the professionalism, the absolute refusal to let them diminish you. And then I saw what happened after. Your promotion. All of it. It made it feel real. Possible. You showed me what the destination looked like. So I just wanted to say thank you." For the first time in a long time, the weight on Eva's shoulders felt different. It was still heavy, but it felt less like a burden and more like a mantle. She looked at Maya, seeing the fierce intelligence and the passion for flight in her eyes, the same passion that had driven her own journey. The cost of the incident had been immense, scarring her in ways no one could see. But this right here was the other side of the ledger. This was the unforeseen positive turbulence. A new idea began to form in her mind, a way to transform her symbolic status into something tangible. "Maya," Ava said, her voice finding a new warmth and purpose, "your record is excellent. But you're right, this job is more than just flying the plane. How would you feel about being the first member of a new mentorship program I'm putting together? For new pilots, we'll pair them with senior captains, give them guidance not just on the technical skills but on how to navigate the other challenges." Maya's face lit up with a brilliant, unadulterated joy. "Captain, I would be honored." After Maya left, Ava walked back to her window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. Down below, a Boeing 787, her plane, gracefully lifted off the runway, climbing into the twilight. She had lost her peace, her privacy. She had been unwillingly cast in a national drama. But in surviving the storm, she had been given the power to chart a new course, to make the path a little smoother for those who would follow her into the sky. The work was far from over. It had just begun. And for the first time in a long year, that felt less like a burden and more like a privilege. In the end, there was no simple victory. Captain Ava Rostova won her battle, but the war against prejudice rages on. Karen Miller lost her job, but her story became a rallying cry for those who feel left behind, twisting a clear injustice into a murky culture war debate. This real-life drama shows us that karma isn't always clean and simple. The consequences of our actions ripple outwards in ways we can't predict, affecting heroes, villains, and bystanders alike. Eva's story is a powerful reminder of the grace required to navigate a biased world, and the heavy price that often comes with standing up for what is right. It proves that sometimes The most important turbulence isn't in the sky. It's right here on the ground. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help us share it with more people. Consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the stories that shape our world. And please, share your thoughts in the comments below. What does the idea of karma mean to you in a situation this complex? Thank you for watching.